There are indeed countries that no longer exist, from being merged, getting split, to adopting a new name. Here are countries that no longer exist in 2023. Back in the day, there was this place called Abyssinia, also known as the Ethiopian Empire. It was basically a kingdom located in Northeast Africa.
The Ethiopian Empire, which existed from 1270 to 1974, is one of the longest surviving empires in history and is defined by its distinctive character and perseverance.
Fast forward to the early 1900s, and the empire splits into two separate states, Eritrea and Ethiopia. So why did Eritrea and Ethiopia go their separate ways? Well, it all started with Ethiopia trying to take over Eritrea, even after the Italians left. Basically, the people of Eritrea weren't too happy about being annexed by their neighboring country. To make matters worse, the Ethiopian monarchy wasn't exactly treating the Muslims in the Eritrean government very well, which only added fuel to the fire. This all eventually led to a revolution, and the two countries went their separate ways. Just like the Ethiopian Empire, Austria-Hungary, also known as the Austro-Hungarian Empire, didn't last forever. It was established way back in 1867 and included a bunch of different countries and regions, like Austria, Hungary, parts of the Czech Republic, Poland, Italy, Romania, and the Balkans. But all good things must come to an end, and this empire crumbled at the end of World War I in 1918.
The collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire is often explained far too simply. It was losing a war, and the empire had too many ethnic groups, so everybody declared independence.
So what triggered the collapse? It was a pretty major event in geopolitics that happened because the country had a lot of internal problems that just kept getting worse. Basically, different parts of the country weren't getting along, and tensions were running high. Then World War I happened, and that really pushed things over the edge. To make matters even worse, there was a huge crop failure in 1918, and the country was facing economic crisis. All of these factors combined eventually led to the country falling apart. Czechoslovakia is another country that ceased to exist because of the split factor. It used to be a country in Eastern Europe, and it was actually a pretty big deal until it peacefully split into two separate countries in 1993, the Czech Republic and Slovakia.
On January 1, 1993, Czechoslovakia split into the nations of Slovakia and the Czech Republic. The separation was peaceful and came as a result of nationalist sentiment in the country. The decision to split was decided by the Federal Assembly, who voted on the matter.
So why did the Czech Republic and Slovakia decide to go their separate ways? Well, it wasn't because the people in either country were begging for independence, I can tell you that. In fact, there wasn't a clear majority in either country who supported the split. The thing is, there were some pretty big disagreements between the Czechs and the Slovaks. A lot of people in Slovakia felt like the government was too focused on Prague, while many Czechs felt like they were shelling out too much money to support Slovakia. Ultimately, it was the prime ministers of the two countries, Václav Klaus and Vladimir Mečiar, who agreed to split things up following the 1992 elections. Did you know that Bengal used to be its own kingdom in southern Asia? It was independent and ran the show from 1338 to 1539, pretty similar to Czechoslovakia. Nowadays, the area where Bengal used to be has been split up into two different states, Bangladesh and India. Okay, so get this. Back in 1905, the British Raj decided to do a little reorganizing of the Bengal presidency. They called it the First Partition of Bengal, and basically split the region into two parts, the mostly Muslim eastern areas and the mostly Hindu western areas. But get this, they only kept the new setup for 6 years before undoing it. Now, here's where things get interesting. A lot of Indian nationalists were really upset about this partition. They saw it as a deliberate attempt to divide the region on religious grounds, with the eastern part having a Muslim majority and the western part being mostly Hindu. To them, it was a challenge to Indian nationalism. It was a pretty big deal. Surprisingly, 1911 saw a reunited Bengal. Unfortunately, this didn't last long, as Bengal was split a second time in 1947, mainly due to religious reasons. Now we come to a country that no longer exists. Prussia was actually a prominent country back then. It started out as a duchy in 1660 and eventually became a full-on kingdom by the following century. At its peak, peak, Prussia actually included a huge chunk of what we know now as Germany and Western Poland, but things didn't exactly work out for Prussia in the long run. By the time World War II came around, it was just a federal unit of Germany. After the war ended, that was pretty much it for Prussia. It was fully dissolved and became a thing of the past. So during the Weimar Republic, the Free State of Prussia got screwed over big time after Franz von Papen and his buddies pulled off a coup in 1932. Basically, Prussia lost almost all of its legal and political power. And then a few years later, in 1935, the Nazis went ahead and completely tore it apart and turned it into a bunch of Nazi German districts called Gaue. This is reminiscent of the USSR, also known as the United Socialist Soviet Republic. Although the USSR split into other countries, it used to be the top communist country. But in 1991, things got pretty crazy, and it was divided into 15 different countries. We're talking Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Estonia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan, all of them going their separate ways. It's basically impossible to say just one thing caused the USSR to fall apart, because lots of different factors, both inside and outside of the country, all of these factors contributed to the demise of that global superpower. We're talking political factors, economic factors, nuclear factors, involvement in Afghanistan, and of course, social factors. This next country didn't split like the USSR. Rather, it was annexed into another. Yeah, we're talking about Texas. So back in 1836, the Republic of Texas fought for and won its independence from Mexico.
With the growing population also came growing unrest. And by 1836, a new Texas government was formed, and a declaration of independence from Mexico followed.
And get this, it stayed its own independent country for almost a decade until it was eventually taken under the wing of the good old USA and officially became a part of the United States in 1845. The annexation of Texas was one of the most hotly debated events in American history, like ever. The whole thing was a huge deal. It would end up having a major impact on the US for many, many years to come. Some folks were all like, nah, we shouldn't be bringing Texas into the fold, and they had a long list of reasons why. But then there were others who were like, no way, we gotta make this happen. And they had their own reasons too. Things like slavery, war, manifest destiny, politics, and constitutional rights were thrown into the mix as well. At the end of the day though, it turned out that there were simply more compelling reasons to annex Texas to the Union. Then there were reasons to leave it be. And when you think about how Texas got started in the first place, well, it just kind of made sense that it should be a part of the United States anyway. And there you have it, countries that no longer exist in 2023.
Colorful Grand Prismatic Spring is in Yellowstone National Park and is the largest hot spring in the U.S.